Still pending, namely the Tongaat Mall and the Meyersdal Eco Estate building, compliance and safety are still much concern in the construction industry. Now, beyond the set rules and regulations, it seems compliance is the major problem causing these collapse. The South African Council for Project and Construction Management Profession is committing itself to ensuring high-quality safety in this industry, to minimize such occurrences. Claire Deacon, council member, now joins us in studio to chat about this. Claire, good morning to you. Appreciate your time. Just explain to us some of the backgrounds that you need to have documentation-wide in order to get a building underway.
Well, it's not so much about the building, it's about who controls and who is responsible in terms of health and safety on a site, because that's the reason why the majority of the buildings actually collapse. I think that the state of South Africa relative to the construction sector being such an important part of the country's growth going forward means that we have to look after the people who actually work in the industry. And if we don't look after the people, and the people who are providing those support services in terms of health and safety are not adequately trained or not registered with the professional council, that certainly adds to the issues that we have relative to the collapses. I'm not saying that that's the only reason that buildings collapse. It isn't, because it takes a team effort. Health and safety is a major component of any construction or any industry for that matter, not just construction. But it's even more important to in construction because we're killing 2 people a week, at least in the sector. And that's just not acceptable. Not just about the people who are dying, but those we don't even hear about in terms of being ill or being injured or losing a limb. Those are people who are, have souls, they are part of a community. It means that main breadwinner perhaps is a person who now cannot fend for their family. And that is really what it's all about. So by making sure that the whole procurement process and the value chain that is within the construction sector and all the role players, not just health and safety, because health and safety is everyone's responsibility on a construction site, not just health and safety professionals, then we'll get it right. But we have to work together on that.
Claire, let's go back a little bit and chat about the actual construction professionals body. What exactly is the purpose of such a body? What is the vision with regards to that?
The SACP-CMP is a professional body which is part of the Built Environment Professions Councils. There are 7 of them, which falls under the mandate of the Department of Public Works. The SACP-CMP has 3 particular groups of categories: the construction manager, the project manager, and then the more recently added now the health and safety professionals and registered persons. There are 3 categories within the health and safety categories: the professional CHSA, or the professional construction health and safety agent, and then we have health and safety managers, and we have health and safety officers. The health and safety officers are really the people who do the hard work on the ground. The managers are normally those that are managing in large organizations like the Big Five, say, and they are responsible for making sure that what goes out on sites, on the big projects, are in fact in order. The health and safety agent, that's the professional category of the 3 groups, is the person who represents the client. In other words, if, for example, one of you wanted to build a structure, then you would recruit or incorporate a health and safety agent as the professional on your team, with your engineers, with your architects, with your quantity surveyors, etc., to form part of that team. And that team would go forward and make sure that they had minimized any risk which is relative to the workers as well as to the client and any of the other professional team members that are present through that process. And that starts from the time that you even get the idea of the project in your mind, going all the way through the time that you actually hand that structure back over to the client, and that's where it ends. But construction never really ends, so it's always work in progress.
We saw with the Tongaat Mall that there was a concern that the guys working, the foreman, is that what he's called, the guy in charge, needs qualifications as well. What are those qualifications that he needs?
Look, I think that the construction industry is one of those areas where a lot of people end up doing what they do because by default rather than anything else. So there are a lot of people that are practicing in the sector that should actually not be there, because construction is a science, and it needs to be it needs to be driven by underpinning knowledge. And I think that has been identified in terms of SIP skills by Minister Blade Nzimande in terms of the higher education scenario. And that's really what the process is, to go through this whole issue of making sure that the people that are on site, all the way through, from site agent to leading hands, depending on the different types of titles that they have got some underpinning knowledge that actually makes them competent to do the job. In fact, in the latest construction regulations, that is a critical word, competence. And that's really what it's all about, is we need to have competent people doing the work.
Now, Claire, as a consumer, if I wanted to build or extend on my home, what are the steps that I need to make sure are in place in order for my hands to be clean? What are those steps that consumers should follow?
It's a matter of identifying what the risk is and actually managing that risk. And depending, of course, how big your house is or how small it is, there are particular guidelines that have been set out by the Department of Labour in the Construction Regulations 2014, which prescribe certain activities that have to be taken into account. Clearly, there's risk in everything, and one is never going to get rid of the risk entirely, but you can manage it. And if it's properly, properly managed by competent individuals who you have on your team to help you do that particular process, then you should be fine. It's a matter of making sure you've got the correct professionals and the qualified professionals to actually help you do the work.
Mm-hmm. It's also a fairly costly exercise before you even start digging a foundation or laying a brick. I mean, you've got to get through all this paperwork. It is a costly exercise as well.
Yes and no. No building comes cheap really when you actually have to add all the bits and pieces together. However, health and safety is often seen as an add-on, and it shouldn't be that. It should be part of the process. And if you take it as part of the process, then it's no more expensive than having your engineer or your architect or your quantity surveyor on board. You don't want to go to, for example, a dentist to deliver your wife's baby. You're not going to actually go to a whole process of now taking somebody who's not professional to do the job. And that's really what, again, the duty of the council is to make sure that the people who are out there doing and helping you in terms of health and safety are proficient, they've gone through a particular process, and that they can, in fact, do the job.
Now, Claire, when registering as a professional, you obviously need the right qualifications and the right experience as well. But what are those steps involved in the registration process?
Okay. The registration process is really quite stringent because, again, we're wanting to make sure that if we're going to put people out in the field and we are actually underpinning or rather verifying that they've got those qualifications and the ability to their job, the competence, we need to make sure that they can do it. So we have, as council, made sure that over the past few years, identified a whole range of courses and work which is available throughout South Africa and internationally. We don't only look at South African qualifications, in terms of making sure that people have got that underpinning knowledge. We also look at the amount of experience they have in terms of what jobs they've done before, their project profiles. They have to write 2 articles, one on the successes and the successes, and another one on the challenges of 2 particular projects. And then, depending on the category of the individual, the health and safety agents go through an interview, a professional interview with their peers, and then the other 2 categories have to write exams. The health and safety officer writes 1 exam, and the health and safety managers write 2 exams. So it's quite a stiff entry requirements, but it's not above what we have. We have good people in South Africa trying to do, and are very passionate about what they do. So for me, and for us as council, we are just as passionate about it. And the construction management professions as a whole, I think, are very much behind this because it actually makes their job easier.
Just lastly, Claire, you said that we do have good qualified people here in South Africa, but you said we are still seeing 2 deaths a week. What are the loopholes that needs to be closed up?
Again, I think it's teamwork. I think it's, health and safety doesn't happen in isolation, as I also said. It has to be a team effort. It has to be a process where the whole built environment professional team works together. So the architect, if he's designing a very fancy building, the complexity of that building is obviously going to increase the risk of the project. So the effects and the risk processes that are involved with that need to be identified and need to be managed through the process. And you can only do that if you have somebody on board who knows the health and safety risks.
Indeed. Well, Claire, thank you very much for chatting to us here this morning. That was Claire Deacon. She's a council member and registered PRCHSA, chatting to us about construction professionals' body and the dangers if those steps are not followed. We have seen the Tongaat Mall collapse. We've also seen that huge building collapse that took place in Nigeria. Just Claire here reiterating the importance of health and safety in those situations. But let's move on with our bulletin now. And Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and International Relations Minister Maite Nkoane Mashabane are in Lesotho for the inauguration of Prime Minister-elect Makadita Mosidip.